What is up, y'all? So, this video comes on the heels of my successful post about wide knees in an IG post, right? Wide knees for breaststroke kicking. And an interesting thing happened. You know, there's a few people just being stupid. And it is commonly taught like internal rotation of the hips, right? Internal rotation. Ankles and hips, right? But nobody ever talks about the knees. And I don't know. It's definitely a part of just the ignorance of being a swimmer. But outside of that, it's like you don't watch sports, like you don't, like you can't see beyond like yourself. And it's a combination of two things, right? Especially when there are girls commenting on this, right? I'm assuming moms or female coaches, and it's like you should feel the most embarrassed. You have no excuse to not understand ACL and all those CL injuries in women's sports. You're a woman in sports. How do you not know this? And me personally, like I talk a lot about coaching girls because like I want to be the best, right? And to me, you have to actually be a good coach to coach girls, right? Because their peak testosterone is like what, 11 to 13, maybe younger, maybe 10 to 12. So to get them better, right? It's not like you have the cheat code of eternal maturity, of physical maturity, until you're 25 like men do, right? 25, 28, whatever. So to get girls faster, you actually have to be able to like get them faster, right? Often through technique and then, making sure that your strength training was good up until their testosterone peaks. And so that's why, right? I always take an interest in the girl side of the sport because like you have to actually know what you're talking about. You have to know what you're doing. There is no in between. And here's a little hack for you parents and swimmers out there. Is one thing I always look at when people ask me about like teams like in Austin that they want to check out is what, especially college kids, you can use this, college recruits, is I always look at like, okay, how are the girls performing, right? How are their 16 plus their college seniors, how are they performing, right? Now when I look at a relay and I see freshman, sophomore, freshman, senior, junior, whatever it is, relays full of freshmen tell you that when you go through their program, you're not going to be as good as you were when you came in. Okay. Or if you have 50% or more relay, maybe even freshmen and sophomores, depending on the program. But if you have younger swimmers, if you have teenagers making up your A relays and not seniors, especially if you're like an established coach, you've been there long enough to like recruit your guys. Say what it is. You don't know how to coach. Okay, you're not a good coach. Like, just think about it, right? If you're having to rely on new blood every year, that means that these kids are coming to you and their current ability level is mostly from where they were from. It has nothing to do with you. And they're your best swimmers versus the swimmers who have been in your program. They should have gotten stronger. They've done your training. They've done your tapering. But yet, the high school system is beating you and your collegiate resources. You see what I'm saying? So I'm always looking at that. Like when I see relays full of underclassmen, it's like, okay, just, and it's not like it's a one variable means this. It's a collection, right? Now some variables are weighted more, like the relay one, right? You see multiple freshmen. It's a pretty strong variable, right? But yeah, anyways, so that's why I'm like always taking interest in coaching girls and the girl side of the sports, because you actually have to be good at your job. And so anyway, we're going to watch a video on ACL tears. It's going to be a reaction video. It's from, what is this? Why do women suffer more ACL injuries than men? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when girls start maturing, right? So it's like around age 10, I'd say maybe is when it starts, right? Their hips spread to get them ready for to have children, right? And because of that alignment, right? So men's hips sit underneath their, let's just say hips and shoulders, right? Our feet, our knees and our feet. Whereas women tend to be like this, right? So, and that's also why they're less athletic, is because we can send pressure from our foot straight through our body, whereas theirs kind of goes in this way and the body's upright. So, because of this, if they were to plant and change direction and put force, they can break in the knee right here and snap. And that's where those ACL injuries happen, because their feet are planted wider than their hips and they're running and moving and cutting this way. So they're compromised in their knees. Whereas here, everything is aligned, right? And it's when girls start maturing, I always like tell people, especially the breaststrokers, I'm like, hey, I talk to their parents, be like, hey, like they might not be a breaststroker anymore, once they start hitting. I never say the puberty part because I'm sure Safe Sport has something to say about that. So I just don't even broach it here. I can talk about what I want to, or get a little deeper into these things. But I'm always like, hey, like when they start maturing or getting older or hitting puberty, I don't know what word I use. I'll have to go look at an email. But they might not being a breaststroker because their bodies change and their knees things start calcifying, and those knees lose some flexibility. Like I've seen many a times where girls who were double A breaststrokers all of a sudden can't get an A cut in breaststroke anymore and end up becoming really good butterflies, right? That's something whenever I see someone who's a breaststroker, a girl who's a breaststroker, it works for boys, I suppose, but especially girls, like this is always hit. This is always hit. Girl breaststroker who loses her breaststroke ability or knees, whatever, is a great butterfly candidate. For me, using my Rake Lead technique solutions, they've always converted 100% of the time. But as a coach, like you need to know, like even our freestyle stuff, like it's all designed to move movement into the front plane of the body, right? Like you're recovering, you're in front of the body. That shoulder, or that elbow, and that recovery is in front of the body. It's not back here where things can get tight. And just trying and be safer in the technique, but still getting the aesthetic, and the feature right through proper movement patterns. And I think breaststroke knees is one of those, right? Like you don't want to have a girl who has great flexibility in her knees, and then she matures and loses it, and then all of a sudden her knees are hurting and she keeps pushing it, and then you have an ACL injury or sprain or something like that, right? It's unnecessary. So we're gonna go through this, give some people some education on women and their knees when they're maturing, and hopefully this can help you, because guys go through this a little bit too, right? I've said multiple times in other videos, I have a great left breaststroke knee and a right knee that does not bend that way. And when I force it to bend it, sometimes it can survive a practice. It usually doesn't, right? There's times where I do a breaststroke practice with Eddie once I had started transitioning back to breaststroke, and it would 5 kicks in, knees done. And now I can't do breaststroke training the rest of the week, right? So I think, understanding this is a huge part of just prevention, but, injury management and just being anticipatory with taking care of your athletes, So anyway, let's jump into this.
happening to them at a quicker rate than seems to be the case in the men's game. But what's the reason for this, and what can be done about it? When England captain Leah Williamson ruptured her anterior cruciate ligament in March, she became the latest high-profile female footballer to join the long list of players who've sustained an ACL injury. 5 of the 20 nominees for the 2022 Ballon d'Or Féminine, Alexia Putellas, Beth Mead, Vivian Miedemar, Caterina Macario, and Marie-Antoinette Katoto all sustained an ACL injury in 2022. Putellas' injury was particularly cruel, as the 2-time Ballon d'Or winner missed the Women's European Championship.
I want to talk about this real quick. Right, we're on land sports. This is a lot more common. I remember I had this conversation with my dad one day. I don't remember where we were going, but he said just like, "Hey, I want you to notice this. He's like, I want you to look at the girls, right? Girls sports. I forget it was a basketball game or something. Oh no, he didn't either. Well, it wasn't it. I'm sorry. I'm conflating stories. But he basically said to me, he was like, you ever notice that there's a lot of knee injuries? Like there's a lot of girls in braces around their knees. And I was just like, yeah, I've noticed that. It's in high school. And that's when he explained this to me, right, about their hip alignment, their knee alignments. And they think like, low impact jumping off the wall, in strokes. But the ACL and all that stuff is when the knee rotates, the ACL pulls it, snaps it back into place, right? It doesn't pull apart into the rotation. Whatever rotation you do, it pulls back. Now, when you see like in football, when it's just crazy injury, right? The knee will turn and then it gets compromised, like somebody hits it, and then that cord that's in there that's supposed to pull it or snap it back into place gets torn, snap, right? So that's why I say breaststroke, right? Because breaststroke puts the knee in that compromising position and then has to snap it back into place. So that's why we're looking at this, right? So it's kind of like these land injuries happen because it's snapping back into place and it's too far out of position or whatever, to where that tendon gets stretched too much and can't maintain its contact with the knee. Same thing. Okay, like breaststroke kick, we don't want to get to these positions to where we're compromising the athlete in their knee.
After rupturing her ACL on the eve of the tournament. Manchester United defender Aoife Mannion has also suffered 2 ACL injuries in recent years. The Athletics Women's Football Podcast spoke to Fortius Clinic knee surgeon and ACL specialist Andy Williams. He completed Manchester City winger Chloe Kelly's ACL surgery in 2021 and Manchester United defender Aoife Mannion's ACL surgery in 2022. Williams discussed the physiological and environmental factors that put female footballers at greater risk of sustaining these injuries, where future research in this area needs to focus on, and what can be done to prevent these ruptures. Women do have a significantly higher risk of ACL rupture than men. But what are some of the factors? Well, most obviously, some players can just be unlucky. The standard of women's football has risen rapidly in a very short fatigue among players. Williams also describes a lessening difference between men's and women's football, but one which is still a factor. In the men's game,
Oh, sorry guys, I didn't know the mic was off. So basically, this video popped up on my timeline like at least 5 years ago, and like I said, I had from high school talking with my dad, had figured this stuff out on my own, but this video was like the perfect explanation of why these things were happening. So I was like, okay, let's watch this, and this is something I just need to keep in the back of my head because it is important, right? It is very important.
the boys with talent are usually picked out by the time they're 10 years of age, and they receive the best training and become very good athletes very early. The athleticism protects them from injury. By contrast, while the development of young women's players is evolving across the game, previously players spent far less time in academies and fewer years being built into what Williams describes as well to put together athletes.
So we're gonna drop some solutions as this goes on, right? So basically, you need to be treating and I would say even maybe with a little bit more emphasis, you need to be treating your girl athletes with, I don't know, professional respect is the right phrase, but these academies are meant to make pros, right? So that's why I say like professional respect. Like you need to treat them and make sure that they're being pushed in the same way that a guy needs to benefit from the academy, right? So the girl may be doing it and getting all the same gains, but is she getting them at the same rate of improvement that the guy's getting at? And I don't mean necessarily rate of improvement, that was a bad term, but like focus, right? Like, is she getting the nth percentage of gain? Make sure that you're on top of that, coaches.
Further biological explanation relates to knee structure. Williams explains that women tend to be a little less bow-legged than most of the male players. If you look at a male team, most of the players have bowed legs. Women tend to have straighter or occasionally knock knee alignment, and that's a risk factor. Within the middle of the knee joint at the end of the femur, which has a notch in it, that notch might be smaller in women, and that's where the ACL lives. If that notch is smaller, it means there's less room for excursion of the ligament, and it's more likely to get chopped by the femur moving onto it. And speaking to Sky Sports in 2022, Dr. Emma Ross, a female health specialist, also spoke of the role played by the menstrual cycle. When estrogen is elevated in the menstrual cycle, and that happens in about the second week, it can affect the stability of joints. Speaking to the Inside the WSL column, Dr. Stone explained that it can interfere with the collagen in our joints and can create looser, more lax joints. A loose joint is therefore less stable and more inclined to injury. The full link between the menstrual cycle and increased injury risk isn't fully understood yet. Similarly, while women's feet differ in a variety of ways, and playing in boots made specifically for men also carries an injury risk, the effect upon ACL injuries specifically is hard to determine. Ahead of the 2023 World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, manufacturers are releasing women-only boots. But further research and development is still required. For players who do suffer ACL injuries, there's a further risk post-recovery. ACL reconstruction surgery involves taking a graft, and for football players, Andy Williams, the Fortuitous Clinic knee surgeon, prefers to take that from the front of the knee, a process known as a patella tendon graft. But he says women have smaller patella tendons as a physical issue, because they also typically join the athlete level later. When they were growing, they didn't have the stresses that caused reaction from the body to produce bigger, stronger tissue. So there is a practical...
Something I just thought about, right? This is kind of weird, is that girls mature earlier than guys on average. So physically, it would make sense that they're actually in a higher level of participation. Well, hold on. It would make sense. All right, so let's just say the boys get picked up at 12. The girl would have been developed for maybe 2 years. Okay, so yeah, okay, I'm all right. I'm picking up what he's laying down.
Issue in that everything is smaller. So what can be done? Well, the growth of women's football and the booms in attendance and interest clearly warrant greater diligence surrounding this issue, and data is a priority for Williams. There's a lot of data on men's sports, but women's data is really weak. When I've done my research to follow up on what happened to players after injury, it's all on the internet for men. You can find what happened to a 16-year-old at a certain club, how long...
I think that's about it, guys. Okay, yeah. So let's see. I want to find a video on knee rotation, though. Roll, glide, and rotation of the knee. Roll, glide, rotation. Let's see what pops up. Roll, glide, spin, traction, and compression. Interesting. That's a lot. Okay, here it looks like a good one. It's a big word. Okay, here we go, guys.
Hey everybody, welcome back to OrthoNugs. In this video, we're going to discuss the osteo and arthrokinematics of the knee joint or the tibiofemoral joint. So as we discussed in a previous video on hip, arthro, and osteokinematics, it's a good idea to have an understanding of the accessory motions that occur at these weight-bearing joints from both an open kinetic chain and a closed kinetic chain standpoint. So let's start open chain. So we have a right lower extremity here. Motions that occur at the tibiofemoral joint are primarily going to be sagittal plane flexion extension that occurs around a medial to lateral axis. And then we also have rotation, internal and external rotation, or medial and lateral rotation at the tibiofemoral joint. So let's talk about the glides that occur with.
Medial would be your MCL, and lateral is the MCL tendon, right? That side controls that side, and ACL would be or LCL lateral, right?
Those osteokinetic motions, again, from an open chain standpoint first. So open chain, as we extend the knee, this is the concave tibial facets on the convex femoral condyles. So as we extend the knee, that's going to be an anterior, and from this anatomical position, it would be an anterior roll and an anterior glide, concave on convex, so same direction roll glide. And with flexion, that will be a posterior roll and a posterior glide. Now this rotational component. So hopefully.
Okay, so I think this piece he's about to talk about next, this is where people get, like, football players get their ACL, because you'll have that motion and a twist, right? And that's where people have those, like, will make those crazy cuts you see in football games.
Familiar with the screw hole mechanism, there's a normal and necessary amount of transverse plane rotation that occurs at the knee joint. So for example, the last so many degrees of knee extension, there's a bit of external rotation that occurs of the tibia on the femur, and that is known as the screw hole mechanism. So I included a diagram here so you can appreciate the axis of rotation, the superior to or vertical axis of rotation that this tibial rotation occurs around. That axis of rotation, as you can see from this image, cuts through the medial femoral condyle as well as the medial tibial facet. So that is the axis that rotation occurs about. So picturing that axis, when we internally rotate, we need to describe the glide that occurs, or the accessory motion that occurs related to each of these tibial facets. So as we've talked about in multiple videos, when the axis cuts through both articular surfaces, so on the medial side, we have this axis of rotation diving through the medial femoral condyle as well as the medial tibial facet. When the axis dives through both of those articular surfaces, you're going to get a pivot glide or a spin glide. So with internal rotation, again, we identify this arbitrary point. So we've talked about the superior lateral most point on the articular surface. So related to the medial facet, I know this can be confusing, but it's going to be on this lateral most aspect of the medial tibial facet. So with internal rotation, that arbitrary point is going to move anteriorly. So that's an anterior spin or an anterior pivot glide.
So this would be like if I bent my knee and then I jump this way and my whole body snaps this way, right? So my knee, I don't even know if I can show this, right? It's bending. I can keep my foot still. but then my body's turning this way, and you can even kind of see it a little bit, right? It's rotating to go this way. And you can see how my knee is even kind of pointing sideways, even though my shin is pointed forwards, right? So
and then on this lateral facet, tibial facet, you're going to get an anterior translational glide. So with external rotation, same axis through the medial tibial facet and medial. So an example might be you're doing a squat, right? So the tibia is going to be fixed, and now the femur is moving in a closed kinetic chain on that fixed tibia. So in this case, now we have the convex femoral condyles gliding on the concave tibial facets. So with flexion of the knee, you're going to get a posterior roll and an anterior glide. Convex on concave will be opposite roll glide. And then with extension, we will get an anterior roll and a posterior glide. Same goes for tibiofemoral.
So that's what I was talking about when I was saying like it snaps the ACL and the MCL and all those CLs snap the knee back in place. That's what he's talking about. Which way are they snapping back into place?
In a closed kinetic chain. So now we have our fixed tibia, and let's say on this stance leg we are pivoting. So the tibia is fixed, the femur is internally or medially rotating. So we're going to have a pivot glide on the medial aspect of the joint or the medial facet. So this will be an anterior pivot of the medial femoral condyle on the medial facet, and it will be an anterior translational glide of the lateral femoral condyle on the lateral tibial facet. And then if we pivot in the other direction on a fixed tibia, so now this is external condyle, will be a posterior.
Whoops, sorry guys. So we got one more video we're gonna look at, and this is kind of I have no idea what this video is about to be about at all. This one's talking about the muscle that unlocks the screw home mechanism, which honestly, so screw home, okay, I've got that one figured out now. That's because the screws turn, right? So it's the snap back in place, I think, because you're returning home. But if you heard that and you're like, oh, this is kind of confusing to keep track of, like when you use the words like external and internal rotation when you're talking to your athletes, that's how they feel, okay? I didn't learn, I still kind of don't even, I know internal means inwards, external means external, which is outwards. I know that now, but as you're a young athlete just trying to get the information and get better, like the specific dictionary word does not matter to me, okay? Like I remember I had weight coaches tell me stuff and it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Like just speak to me like I'm an athlete. Talk athlete needs to me, okay? So, I mean, I try to stay away from this science speak. I try to, keep it an athlete speak and athlete science. So, anyway, let's jump into this last video, shall we?
All you anatomy nerds. What muscles bend the knee? If you said hamstrings, you're mostly correct. These are for sure the ones you feel during a knee flexion exercise at the gym. But there's a catch. The hamstrings are incapable of bending the knee if the knee is totally locked out straight. They depend on a tiny muscle called the popliteus to unlock the knee and let them take the joint.
Okay, here we go. So this is the video I've been looking for, right? So the ACL and MCL snap back in place, right? You can look at this image right away and see that it's meant to make the knee spin. Okay, like look at that. It's like muscles, it contracts, right? So if it's here and here, it has to contract around and in.
Flexion. And the popliteus uses a little trick of kinesiology called the screw home mechanism, and it is fascinating to me. Today, I'm going to show you how it works. Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Patrick, and this channel is all about anatomy and physiology. So to understand how this little muscle unlocks our knees, we need to know some of the more detailed structures of the knee joints. More specifically, the tibiofemoral joint, which is made of the tibia and the femur, because anatomists are boring when it
I'm gonna try and make sure we get the athlete speak in. So tibiofemoral joint just means joint. Okay, the tibia is the bone. I think it's your shin. The femur is your thigh bone. Bone connected to the thigh bone. And then they're just talking about the joint. So everything that's around the joint, the actual bones, the tendons, right? The CLs, the tendons, and then whatever thing he was talking about earlier. Everything that's around the knee is your tibiofemoral joint. So and includes the kneecap. So when you hear this word, they just mean the knee. Okay? We're just talking about the knee.
naming things, but we're more interested in the bumps at the end of each of these bones. At the end of the femur, we have two condyles that articulate with the tibia. This is a right femur, so this is the medial condyle, while this is the lateral condyle. Out on the sides are the epicondyles, and in the middle is the trochlear groove, or notch. It's a little groove for your kneecap to glide in. Those condyles of the femur sit nice into little discs of connective tissue called meniscus, or menisci for plural. For those of you who measure liquids in a lab, a meniscus in the knee is the same shape as the meniscus in a test tube. They sit on top of the tibia, or what we call the tibial plateau, and they share a lot of tissue overlap with the big cruciate ligaments, the ACL and the PCL. Inferior to the tibial plateau, the tibia has medial and lateral condyles as well. And that structure, two big condyles.
So condyles are just the end of the bone, right? Because it kind of makes that fork shape, or fork in the road, two turns, whatever. Makes that fork shape. So the condyles are just the end of each fork, right? And your meniscus is just like, it's like a coating on the end of each side. Or no, it's on the end of the south side, which would be your tibia, your shin. Like, why don't they just say shin? Like, so annoying.
A little groove creates something called a hinge joint, which means it only moves in one plane. It can extend thanks to the quadriceps anteriorly, and it can flex thanks to the hamstring group in the back. The quads group shares a common insertion on the tibial tuberosity.
I said I'm going to be commentating. So, guys, this is where people get the knee and the elbow thing, right? It's only meant to bend one way. Obviously, he's about to go into how it rotates, so let's get it.
That big bump on the front of your tibia, but the hamstrings are more diverse. The biceps femoris is the most lateral and inserts on the fibular head. Meanwhile, the semimembranosus and semitendinosus insert on the medial condyle of the tibia after they pass behind the medial condyle of the femur. When the hamstrings work together, they pull the knee into flexion.
You can see how these wrap around the knee, and how if you pop it from the side and make that knee go in a way, like what's on the outside is just going to get stretched out of position until it snaps. So it's easy to see like how these injuries can happen, right? If that knee is just so far out of position, you gotta tear.
Okay, so while we call the knee a hinge joint, it's quite a bit different to the hinge on a door. Instead of one static pivot point, the axis for the knee is actually in the middle of the femoral condyles. So during flexion and extension, the tibia has to slide back and forth on the condyles of the femur, which it does thanks to a little help from the cruciate ligaments. During extension, the PCL tightens and helps glide the tibia and
See, this is athlete speak right here, right? Now, I've never studied the ACL or stuff. I just kind of figured out that they are meant to snap it back into place, because tendons, they snap things into place. They don't, they're not a muscle where it contracts. Muscle contracts and pulls on the tendon, and then the tendon just transfers that energy to whatever it's attached to, whatever bone it's attached to, like the Achilles tendon, right? Your calf contracts, pulls on the Achilles pulls the heel up, that makes your toe go down and gives you vertical. So sometimes, guys, you gotta use common sense, you know what I'm saying? This is why I'm showing you all this video, right? Because like, why does this not make sense to coaches? Like, this is your breaststroke kick, right? You load up that, and then like your cruciate ligaments. I never knew that the C meant cruciate, or I think they said cruciate. Right, it's what your cruciate ligament is what's going to snap it once it goes too far out. Is what's going to snap it that kick back into place. And as ligaments, you can't train them. Ligaments and tendons, you can't train, right? You can just make them stronger and more resistance to being pulled out of whack.
Likewise, during flexion, the ACL tightens and helps glide the tibia posteriorly. Now, here's the problem. The knee isn't a perfect symmetrical hinge, and that causes some weirdness at full knee extension. Specifically, it's those condyles that aren't perfectly even. The medial condyle of the femur is about half an inch longer than the lateral condyle. So while the tibia is sliding on the femur during the last 20 degrees of knee extension, the tibia externally rotates about 15 degrees, this direction, on the femur. This phenomenon is called the screw-home mechanism. At the same time, this full knee extension is actually slightly hyperextended. So after we
Slightly hyperextended. I want to say he had another word in there, an adjective. So, and this is what I'm saying, guys, when I'm talking about this breaststroke stuff, is that the breaststroke kick is a compromised position. It is, like, if you look at people do it, their leg is bent at a right angle. Like, it does not look healthy. And you're basically putting yourself in this compromised position so the CLs, your cruciate ligaments, can snap it back into place with this screw-home mechanism. So this is why you need to know this stuff, because you literally have to put the leg in a no-no zone to have a good breaststroke kick. So you need to make sure you're as safe and as prepared and as anticipatory as possible if you're going to do this. Like, you're basically putting your kid in a bad position on purpose to have a good breaststroke kick.
Our tibias into position, soft tissues like the cruciate and collateral ligaments are pulled taut, which makes the knee a little more stable. And when it comes to standing upright, that's a huge advantage. We can lock out our knees and rely on connective tissue instead of using energy through our muscles. Unfortunately, getting out of full knee extension presents a little bit of a problem. The hamstrings pull straight up. They don't insert at an angle that'll let them untwist a tibia that's been rotated by the screw-home mechanism. And that's where the popliteus muscle comes in. This muscle originates on the lateral aspect of the femur and the upper part of the lateral meniscus and inserts on the medial proximal tibia. You see how it runs in this kind of diagonal path? Well, that'll allow it to internally rotate the tibia, unlocking the knee. The muscle has a twisty path of pull because its job is to untwist the tibia. But there's a big old caveat attached to all this, because how the popliteus moves the knee depends on whether the foot is on the ground or not. If the foot is on the ground, the tibia is stable and it's what's called a closed chain movement. These are things like squats or deadlifts or lunges. But if the foot is off the ground, the femur is now the more stable part of the joint, and you're performing what's called an open chain movement. This would be something like a hamstring curl on a machine. In a closed chain movement, the popliteus will contract.
And this is important because obviously swimming would be a closed chain movement. You know these things. Like, imagine you have a coach that's training this as, or not even aware of they're training it, but they're incidentally or accidentally training it as a closed chain movement. And it's supposed to be an open chain movement, which literally, like, if you're doing dry land, I know people will do the feet thing and they sit down through the middle while their feet go into that weird angle. Technically, that's training it as a closed chain movement, and it's not a closed chain movement. So that's why you need to know this stuff, guys.
Externally rotate the femur to unlock the knee. But when you lift your leg off the ground into an open chain movement, the popliteus will internally rotate the tibia to unlock the knee, then the hamstrings can follow through after that. So let's do a high-level recap. The screw-home mechanism is an external rotation of the tibia during terminal knee extension that happens thanks to the uneven bumps at the end of the human femur. But what's the big deal? Why does any of this matter? It matters because the ability to completely extend our knees is crucial for day-to-day activities. If we couldn't get into full knee extension, we wouldn't be able to stand for a long period of time, and walking would be a lot harder. So folks in physical therapy and orthopedics spend a lot of time focusing on that specific range of motion, terminal knee extension. They're not necessarily trying to rehabilitate the popliteus muscle, but because they're working in the last few degrees of knee extension, they need to know that the tibia is going to twist a little bit. It's all part of the puzzle they have to solve in the rehabilitation journey. I hope you learned something today. If you did, consider liking the video and telling me more about...
Oops, sorry guys. Popliteus. So that's the key word there, popliteus. So if that is what unlocks the knee, that would also mean that on top of, your hip rotation, that the popliteus is what's going to move the knee, among other things, but mostly the popliteus, because the CLs are meant to snap back into place, right? Snap the knee back into place. I forget which one specifically. I want to say the ACL is the one that snaps it into place, and then I think you said the LCL, posterior, anterior. Whichever one's in front, I think it's MCL, is meant to pull it, that pulls it straight. So PCL pulls it into bending when the muscle pulls on the tendon, right? Or I don't know, whatever it is. Unimportant. But the knee rotates, right? And you need to, like I tell my breaststrokers all the time, like, hey, if this is uncomfortable, you need to let me know immediately, because it means we're compromising your knee. And this is the thing, guys, because it ain't about swimming at the end of the day. Like, you don't want, I want you to really think about this, guys. Like, really think about this. You have a kid go on to be an Olympic gold medalist, world record holder breaststroke, regarded as the best ever. But now they can't walk the rest of their life without assistance. Like, what's it worth? You know what I'm saying? So that's why I take it seriously, because, most of these kids, they're not going to be, the best ever. Maybe they swim past high school. Well, not my kids swim past high school, you know what I'm saying? But, you know what I mean? Like, the gains that we're kind of reaching for, because a lot of this knee stuff, it's only taught as hip and ankle. And I'll tell you firsthand, I think I said this before, maybe it was a different YouTube video, that when I get into a good knee position, so let me turn this down a little bit. Right? If I get into a good knee position, like the moment that I bend that knee and then I try and turn my foot out like that, oh wow, you can even see my knee rotating right there, right? Like I can feel like, okay, so my foot's here, but it's locked. When I try and relax my ankle and keep it out, I can feel it right now on the inside of my knee. Okay? So I'm not saying I could feel an injury, right? I'm not saying that it was unsafe what I was doing. I would say if we're just looking at it, it's an unsafe position, and that we don't want it to become an unsafe position. There we go. Okay? Because technically it's not a safe position, right? We're kind of hyperextending out of a safe zone for the sake of an open chain movement where the knee's going to snap back and through the screw rotation motion. So I just wanted this to be totally clear. People talking I mean, yo, this chick said, well, that's kind of a stretch. Oh. See, and this is where like the hooper in me comes out, because it's like, how could you be this undedicated to your craft? Like you would not be a coach because you would have been on the end of the bench getting no playing time in high school, and you wouldn't have had access to the resources you need to become a coach if you had thought like this. So it's like I meet a coach like that or talk to a coach like that. It's like you're in my head. This is gonna sound harsh, but like I said, this is the hooper in me, and hoopers are harsh. It's like you shouldn't be coaching. Like you're a dud. You're a dud. I'm not saying if you don't know this stuff, ignorance is always a great excuse, but once you know, it becomes a choice. And it's just like with this girl, like, how could you not care about your craft this much to make sure that you're not that you're wrong, or that you're, what word am I looking for? That you're not incorrect. No, that's not the right word. How could you not do the work to make sure? Yeah, how could you not do the work to make sure you're not incorrect? Right? Because it's what you do know, right? So, me. So this is what I'm saying, right? I go and I'm worrying about breaststroke, right? This is just me just use me as this random placeholder person, right? And I learned the hips and I learned about the ankles, right? This is what you need in breaststroke. But then I see a kid not use their hips intentionally, but their knees are making that crazy angle, right? And then I start to notice that, because natural born breaststrokers typically suck at backstroke, and in the worst case, they suck at all other strokes. So I started noticing that these kids who can't swim any other stroke have this non-hip rotation, hyper knee extension for a breaststroke kick, right? And they're my best breaststrokers. It immediately takes this absolute term that it's hips and ankles and throws it on its face. And that's the thing. Like, I remember somebody was talking about the crossover turn, and they said, like, you can't mix, and this is where language gets you in trouble. People aren't that anal about language, so they just, get a pass on, and people don't correct them. But there's absolute terms, and then there's not absolute terms, right? And this guy said, you have to push off on your belly. And then have to. That's a 100%, this is the rule. It has to. One way it can be done. And then the next sentence says something about being relative to vertical. It's like, no, that's not what you don't know what you're talking about. But if you're not that critical about wow, this is actually a conversation I had with a girl this weekend in a one-on-one. If you're not that careful about your language, you're going to have confusions, right? And with the girl, she was talking about how her coach wanted her to do like swim bigger, which is always a good thing, right? But she said the coach wanted her to do straight arm. But really what she meant was swim bigger, right? Now, if I hear straight arm and I coach her to get around that or to do it correctly, I'm giving her the wrong feedback because she gave me a miscommunication. Now, luckily, I said, keep something. Let me think about what you actually mean, because I know that you're a kid. You don't know. You can't communicate what you actually mean. And we ended up working through it, and then we had to talk about the importance of communication. And I told her, like, you're young. You're not gonna, like, it took me till I was about 27 to get like a strong grasp of communicative skills. I've always had a great vocabulary, but being absolute in my speech, using the right words, like not using an absolute, it has to be, you have to, and then conflicting that in the next sentence. Like, these things are so annoying. And I'm on a monologue right now. Sorry, guys. But, I hope this video was informational. I hope it helps you understand breaststroke kicking a lot better. It is a compromising position you're putting your athlete in, and you need to treat it as such. You need to coach it as such. And it's not worth sacrificing your kids' knees for the rest of their life, right? Especially in old age, because that's when life, what do they say, life catches up with you, or it'll kill you. The thing about life is it'll kill you. That's when they're going to pay for it, is in their old age. And you don't want to be, gone from the earth, and this kid's got a grudge with you because you made them do breaststroke kick and their knees hurt, but didn't hurt that bad because they were young. And now at 60 years old, they got messed up. They got jacked up knees, right? So, it is a compromising position. Treat it as such. And just because they can doesn't mean they should, right? Like I said, if I'll let some kids get away with it, this compromising position and without hip rotation, if they suck at all the other strokes, because odds are that they're born breaststrokers, and that's actually their skill set, is to be in that position safely. When it comes to kids who are, and this kind of goes to Kate Douglas, really, when it comes to kids that are good at other strokes who don't have the hip rotation, I am very skeptical. Because I know you're not a natural breaststroker, which means your knees are probably a little bit more normal than everybody else's. Because breaststroke knees don't really work in all the other strokes, right? So if you're able to do other strokes and then your knees are here, you might be just tough, right? And we need to be smart. So I hope this helps, guys. Drop a like, leave a comment. What do you think about this? What do you think about the hip ankle rotation? And on the ankle thing, I don't think I said this, is, you can have great breaststroke knees, kind of like what I was saying about myself, but on one knee, the moment I turn that ankle out, I know that my right knee, right? The moment I turn that ankle into the correct spot, I can feel it in my knee, and that's how I know I don't have a right breaststroke knee. My left leg is fine, right? When I actually use a correct breaststroke ankle. So once again, guys, leave a like. Let me know what you think about these comments. Let me know what you think about the ankle, the hip, and then the rotation of the knee. If you think I'm, full of hot garbage, or if this is something that, you're going to use to, better coach your athletes and better protect your athletes, let me know in the comments. Make sure that you follow, subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on those notifications. Peace.